Welcome back to the Bernard Lee Poker Show. I always love doing this show, and I will tell you, it's the show. I say this to my guest every year. It's the show I do the most research for and spend the most time doing all of the looking up. As much as I do see some of the films, obviously understanding all the little ins and outs. There's so much to the Academy Awards this year, the 93rd Academy Awards, and who better to talk about them with than renowned film critic Richard Roeper. Richard, thanks for joining us once again here on the Bernard Lee Poker Show.
Bernard, this is our 127th annual show together. And I got to say to you, it's so good to see you, my friend. And I know obviously primarily always talking about poker. And I will say this, we look for silver linings in this pandemic. And I can tell you this, I've learned and relearned games like 5-card stud, which I hadn't played since the 80s, right?
Right.
Which is like in the Cincinnati Kid was the featured game back in the day. So there's some benefits to being quarantined for a year.
Exactly. And this has been obviously, as we mentioned before, we do this for many reasons. One, Richard Roeper is a excellent poker player in his own right. We met at the poker table for some charity events. Also, a lot of people love the Academy Awards and doing betting pools, so that always helps with it. And third, it's my show, so I can do what I want. And I like this topic. It's always been a fun show. We've done this for the last several years. So you know what? We're going to do it. And usually it's held in February because that's when the Academy Awards is held. But this year it was postponed till April 25th. It'll be held very soon. And it's the first time since 1934, the 6th Academy Awards, where the film nominations are actually over a 2-year calendar year, because there were films that appeared for the first time in 2021 that will be under consideration. Usually that ends at the end of the previous year. So it's the first time that has happened. Of course, this is a very unique year because so many films could not be released fully in a theater because of the COVID pandemic. There were so many films that were delayed or either postponed or even canceled because of the COVID pandemic. And it's a very interesting time, to say the least. Before we get into our topics, and typically, if people have not heard the show before, we will do all the major 6 categories. We will start off with best actor, then best actress, best supporting actor, best supporting actress, best director, and then best picture. But before we get into all of those categories, Richard, I kind of open the floor to you of, it has been an interesting year. It has been a really unprecedented year. What has been your take? And looking back a year ago to now, how do you feel like we have how the movie industry has done? Because there was even talk that they were potentially even going to cancel this Academy Awards because there wasn't going to be potentially enough movies. How do you think it's all gone, in your words?
It's been crazy, Bernard. As you know, I see about 250 movies a year. I also do a lot of reviews of streaming shows. And in some cases, even before the pandemic, the studios would send me a link so I could watch it in my home theater. But for the major event movies, whether it's the Avengers or a big comedy or a franchise like the Top Gun sequel that was going to come out and will eventually come out, they want me to see that in a theater. I see it in a theater maybe 2 weeks before it comes out. A lot of times they'll give tickets away to fans, which I love, because then you're getting the experience of seeing the movie close to what the real experience would be. And I love that, especially for the comedies and the horror films where you love to get scared together, and the big, Marvel Avengers movies. Bernard, I went 14 months without seeing a movie in a theater. Wow. Everything I saw at home. All the theaters, I'm in Chicago, and all the theaters for a while were closed and a few were reopening, but the studios still weren't ready to have the big movies in theaters. I just recently saw Godzilla versus King Kong was the first movie I saw back in the theaters. But it was kind of the perfect movie to see in a theater. I saw it in the Dolby sound or surround kind of thing where your chair vibrates and the screen is huge. It's meant to be seen on the big screen. Big, dumb, fun action movie. So from my corner of the world, it's been very strange. And I do feel, and listen, we know we're all putting this in perspective. There are a lot more, serious things happening, but this is a big jobs creating industry. It's not just the millionaire stars. If when we talk about 250 people working on a movie, there's 5 or 10 who are making a ton of money. They're in front of the camera, or they're the director or the producer, and everybody else is union and caterers and grips and things like that. So all of that shut down. And the same thing with movie theaters. The theater owners, think about all the jobs, the ticket takers and the ushers and the concessionaires, and all of that went away. It's starting to come back. It's kind of on a parallel track with sports, where we're seeing now with
Hmm.
baseball, where you're getting 15 or 20% attendance. Same thing with movie theaters. And unfortunately, some of the movie theaters are never reopening. And that is a tragedy,
Yeah.
because I still believe that there's an audience to see movies in theaters, and people love to see them. The studios, I think, have actually done a pretty good job of adjusting. You mentioned they expanded the window for the Academy Awards
Hmm.
so that some of these prestige movies, the studios kept hoping they'd be able to get them in theaters. In a lot of cases, they finally said, you know what? Let's at least get Nomadland out there. Let's get The Trial of the Chicago 7 on Netflix. Yeah, it would have been great. To me, one of the real casualties in terms of I would have loved to see it with an audience, Bernard, was the Coming to America sequel, Coming to
Ah,
America,
yeah,
which,
yeah, yeah.
not everybody loved. I actually thought it was great, because it was basically a cover version of the first movie. They did all the greatest hits, but they had the amazing cast and Eddie and Arsenio and everybody. But that's a movie you really would have loved to have seen in a theater, and
Yeah,
really
yeah.
have the joy and the laughter with the audience. So, we're moving forward now. I think we're going to start seeing movies in theaters, but you talked about some of these films. Paramount just announced they're moving a lot of their 2021 movies to 2022. They don't want to put Top Gun, the sequel that's been 30 years in the making. They don't want to put it in theaters where there's only 30 or 40%
Right,
attendance. They want to
right.
put it out there like it deserved to be put out there. The James Bond, the last Daniel Craig James Bond movie, I'm like, by the time that thing gets released, he's going to be in a retirement home. I mean, so and that's just some films I think they just want to make sure people see in theaters, and I respect that. But I also think Hollywood was smart, and get these movies out. And in terms of the Oscars, it's interesting because almost everything that's nominated, almost every performance, every film is actually available for folks to watch at home.
Right,
Whereas in the past, you and I would talk about the movies, and you would say,
right,
even as a movie lover, you're like, I haven't seen 80%
right,
of these movies. And most people
right,
hadn't, because
right.
they're not the commercial hits. Now, if you want to watch uh, One Night in Miami, if you want to watch Promising Young Woman or Nomadland, it's right there on your computer. You can
Right.
watch it on your device.
Right, right. And that's like you said, it's very rare. Usually you had to wait. And I remember seeing Parasite afterward because of all
Yeah,
the buzz and a
right.
lot of the movie theater, the film productions obviously utilize that
Yep.
and really get all of that going. So
Yep.
it has been obviously an incredible year. Amazing that hopefully we are seeing a light at the end of the tunnel
Mhm.
with some of the vaccines that are coming out, and hopefully we will within, unfortunately, it's probably going to take another 6 months to 9 months before we're really very comfortable, like
Yeah.
you said, in theaters. But at least we're starting to move forward. And kudos to the Academy that they are now going to have the ceremony. It'll
Hmm.
be a very different ceremony. There won't be a host again. It'll be
Right.
I think, third year in a row there won't be a host. Not because of the pandemic, but that's how the kind of
Yeah.
trend
That's the
has been.
trend. I don't think they can
Um,
find anybody who wants to be the host, because they're
yeah,
afraid
yeah,
some tweet they sent out in 2008 will come back to haunt them.
right,
So,
right, right,
it's
right,
like, I talked to somebody, I won't say his name because he told me this privately, but it's someone who has been approached in previous years to host, and he had thought about it, and he told me flat out, he goes, I'm never doing it now. He goes, it's a no-win situation. You have
right.
to work for like 6 weeks with a team of writers, and they don't pay you anything, by the way, if you host the Academy
Oh
Awards.
wow, I didn't know that. Yeah,
It's all about, oh, this is the amazing exposure. So they have to
right,
pay like the SAG after minimum. But he said, he goes, it's just not worth the risk anymore. He goes, because the minute my name is announced, everyone's going to comb through my entire past. He goes, but
right,
also any joke I tell,
right.
I mean, you look at past monologues, some of the most brilliant ones. I mean, you look at the stuff Chris Rock used to say back in the day when he was hosting award shows, and it's like, it's not worth it anymore to take that
Right.
chance. So I don't think they'll have a host for the Oscars anytime in the near future either.
Wow. Well, it's also a little bit unusual because usually it's held at the Dolby Theater. It's been
Yep.
there since
Yep.
really, I think it was 2001.
Yep.
But this year, they're also going to add Union Station, which is a little different, obviously, because it has been the backdrop for many films over the years. Some
Yep.
people may know Catch Me If You Can, The Italian Job, Pearl Harbor. A lot of movies have used the station as a
Yeah.
backdrop, but it's going to be part of the Academy Awards now, right?
Yeah, and for people who don't know, you'd recognize the building if you saw it because it's been in so many movies and TV shows. This great kind of Art Deco structure. And Bernard, it's interesting you mentioned, like for example, in Catch Me If You Can, it was the Miami Bank. It was not a train station. You know, it was
Oh,
actually
yeah,
used as
yeah.
the bank.
Neat.
In Dark Knight Rises, it was a courthouse. You know,
Yeah.
Blade Runner, they used it. So it's got such an amazing look to it, exterior and interior, that it can be turned into almost anything. And the interesting thing too, you mentioned, and they'll have some stuff happening at the primary location, but the presenters and the nominees will be at Union Station. And then they realized after the nominations came out, because Steven Soderbergh, who's one of the co-producers of the telecast, and he really wants to make it better than the Grammys and the Emmys and the Golden Globes, which kind of they didn't know quite what to do with the remotes and stuff. So he said,
Right.
I don't want anybody doing video chats. I don't want anybody doing Zoom. Then it was brought to his attention that we have such an international group
Right.
of
Right.
nominees this year, and many of them are overseas, and either they can't or they won't. In some cases, like in the UK, you can't travel here right now. And
Right.
so
Right.
they're going to have a hub in London
Right.
for, I think, about 9 or 10 nominees. And in all cases, you get to bring one guest if you're a nominee, and that's it. And then presenters. But they announced the presenters this week, and it's the A list of A list. Anybody who's available, if it's it's last year's winners usually get you get your Joaquin Phoenix, your
Right.
Renee Zellweger, but like Halle Berry, Brad Pitt, a lot of huge stars who have won Oscars, and Brad Pitt won just last year too. But they're not necessarily always going to the Oscars, but I think they want to be there in the tuxes, in the nice gowns, kind of saying we're back. Hollywood's back. They're even going to have a
Mhm.
red carpet with limited press and just a few photographers, no fans. But we didn't see that with the other award shows. They just showed everybody in kind of these cavernous locales, everyone kind of looking at everybody else like, what do we do next? So they're trying to still make it a glamorous event while still being safe and responsible. And we mentioned the fact that because so many of these movies are available on streaming, I think the audience might be pretty large because a lot of people will say, oh, I've seen a lot of these films. Like you can
Mhm.
catch up between now and the Oscars.
Right. Right. Before we get into the specifics, there are two things that I wanted to bring up that I
Okay.
thought were pretty interesting
All right.
overall. So statistically, I'm a math guy, so I got to do the
Yes, you
stats.
are.
So it has been in the past that the Academy Awards have been criticized for basically being the white awards, right?
Yeah.
And there were many people who were upset that certain people were not nominated over the years. Well, that
Yeah.
has definitely changed this year. And kudos to the Academy for
Yeah.
recognizing people of color. If you look at the Academy Award, those four major categories,
Hmm.
9 of the 20 are of color,
Yep.
whether African American, Asian, Muslim.
Yep.
And if you add on the directors, we're
Hmm.
talking 11 of the 25.
Yeah.
Let's
Fantastic.
start with that. What's your take on that new development, basically?
Well, it is a new development, Bernard. You mentioned, the Oscars so white hashtag movement was just about 5 or 6 years ago, and there
Right,
were 2 straight years where all 20 acting nominees were
right,
Caucasian.
right.
And, it's sort of a chicken and egg thing because, it's reflecting what was out there. And I'm not saying that there weren't performances by people of color that should have been nominated because there were, but the Academy and the business and the producers and the studios have also recognized, we got to make movies that look like the world, that look like America.
Right,
And
right.
I mean, look, you can go back and say, look at Black Panther as a classic
Hmm.
example. There had been some other superheroes of color, but nothing on that level before. And that thing became first of all, one of the best superhero movies ever made, but also one of the most popular. But they've also, Hollywood has given more opportunities to persons of color, to female directors.
Yeah.
I'm friends with Patty Jenks, and she directed the Wonder Woman movies. The
Hmm.
first one in particular, I thought was huge, brilliant film, really, really well done. Bernard, she directed a film called Monster about 20 years ago. Charlize
Of
Theron won the
course,
Oscar for
of
that.
course. Right.
The second film she directed was Wonder Woman. She went 20 years almost without even getting a chance. And then when she did get a chance, it was this amazing thing. But can you imagine a male director, as a young director, directing someone to an Academy Award and having to wait 18 years to get a chance? So the great thing is we're seeing more stories that are more diverse, and we're also seeing more opportunities for actors of color. There was a long time where it was like, unless the role was specifically, this is a black man in 1950s Chicago, this is an Asian woman who has come to America, that's when you would see minorities cast for 70 years in Hollywood. Now, a lot of times it's like, well, who's the best actor for this role? What a revolutionary thought. You know?
Right.
So
And
I
a lot
think,
of it's kind of like reflective, and not to go to the theater, but like how Hamilton did what Lin-Manuel Miranda did. It's like, I know George Washington's Caucasian, but you know what? Chris Jackson's going to play him. And that kind of, maybe, I don't know if it started it, but it was definitely something that, you saw, and now we're hopefully seeing. And then also, you say, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was going to say, Bernard, you just made a great point, because that's the other thing that's been happening. We've been seeing these awesome historical reimaginings of stories with people of color. The series Bridgerton on Netflix, which is a tremendous hit. It's such a big hit that they renewed it for season 2, and now they just renewed it for season 3 and 4 already. And it's very, very, very loosely based on, there's a few characters based on real life people, but in the series and set in the early 1800s, everybody just says, this is the way it is. Nobody says, wait a minute. How come that dude and that woman and that guy? And there was a film last year that actually was I really loved, called the Personal History of David Copperfield.
Yeah.
Which did the same thing. Dev Patel's David Copperfield. Okay, let's go with that, and different characters. And it's kind of just a neat thing. And when people say to me, yes, but David Copperfield didn't look like that, I'm like, well, first of all, he's made up. Okay. It's sort of like the Santa Claus debate. But I also, the great thing is, whenever people say to me, like, you can't just go back into history and change things, I always just say that one word. I go, Hamilton. Okay.
Right. Yeah. So I think that really is the other interesting statistic is first time nominees. And, there are definitely always years where there are first time nominees, but this year, of those acting categories, 12 of the 20 are first time nominees. Again, if you add the directors in there, 15 of the 25 are first time. And, what do you attribute that to? Is it because of this opportunity to have streaming and more? What is the rationale behind so many first time nominees?
I mean, my guess, and I don't know this for sure, Bernard, but that might be the all-time record in terms of percentages.
Yeah.
But again, it's reflective of what's out there. It's also indicative of the Academy itself, because, I give all credit in the world to this. The Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, as recently as 5 or 6 years ago, was like 75% male, 80% white, great percentage, way over 70. And once you're in for life. So there's still, it still is a little bit skewed, but they listened to what people were saying. They listened to the Spike Lees of the world. And Spike Lee tells, he told me this story. I'm sure you might have heard it. Spike Lee said there were so many times when he would drive onto a studio lot to talk about a motion picture, and the only time he'd see a black person was the security guard at the gate. The whole time he was on the studio lot. And then when he left again, and the Academy expanded its membership by about 2,500 members.
Wow.
The vast majority of the new invitees were either women and or persons of color. So you now have a voting body that's also more receptive to a film like Da 5 Bloods or One Night in Miami, which, by the way, all the films we're talking about, these are still universally excellent films that are mainstream entertainment. But you do see, you see a film like Get Out from a couple of years ago that was a huge commercial hit. And I always say, the cliche is, when Hollywood thinks about color, the first color they always think about is green. And if these movies are going to make money, but I think what you mentioned about the first timers is because there are more opportunities. And I love the fact that the Academy didn't look at, there were some, I don't want to name names because they're great actors, but there were some people that people thought for sure were going to get nominated. It would have been their 5th nomination, their 9th nomination.
Right.
And they didn't get it nominated in some cases because enough voters in the Academy said, wait a minute, I don't know that much about this young actor or actress, but that performance is one of the 5 best I've seen this year.
Right. Absolutely. Well, when we come back, we're going to talk about all of those categories that we mentioned. We'll go through each one by one. We'll talk about who the favorites are and some of the great performances that we saw this year when we returned here on the Bernard Lee Poker Show.